guys, this is Sarah Zastro with Cultivate Balance, where we help you to manage stress, have less pain, and live a more joyful life. Today we have an interview for you. This is Joe Shaffner from North Rock Leadership, and he's going to talk to us today about emotional intelligence. This is sort of a buzzword right now, so I'm really excited for this interview. Welcome, Joe. How are you doing today?
Great, Sarah. It's great to be here. Hello, everyone. As Sarah said, I'm with North Rock Leadership. I spent 30 years in the corporate world, and now I do executive and leadership coaching. And I'm here today to teach you a very important concept if you haven't heard it already. So without further ado, I'm going to start. So emotional intelligence, the concept is, hang on, I'm going to share my slides here. Okay, can you see the presentation, Sarah?
Yes.
Okay. So emotional intelligence is a concept that has been around for about 30 years. It was coined by a gentleman named Dr. Daniel Goleman. And I actually have an interesting story. When I started my career at Price Waterhouse, I had an office mate who went to an Ivy League school. And I just assumed that he was going to do better than me because he obviously got into this school, had a higher IQ. And he only lasted 6 months. So that was kind of my wake up. I was, oh, wait a minute. And it was because he really didn't have a good attitude and he was arrogant. So emotional intelligence in essence is really your soft skills. It's a capability for individuals to recognize their own emotions, the emotions of others, and discern between different feelings and label them appropriately. So it's generally being self-aware and practicing it and kind of recognizing what makes you tick. The diagram I like to use is this iceberg. So at the top is IQ. So that's your innate intelligence, where you went to school, your degrees. And at the bottom is EQ. And as I'll show you shortly, EQ trumps IQ all day long. And 10 years ago, there was no evidence of that, but now it's been empirically tested that people with higher emotional intelligence skills do better. And the other good news is EQ can be increased throughout your life. IQ tends to be static, whereas EQ, I'm 56 years old, and every day I try to grow in some way and understand myself better and communicate better with others. So my emotional intelligence is always a work in progress. And with my coaching and executive clients, that's the first piece of work we do is around emotional intelligence. So the concepts around emotional intelligence are self-awareness. How do you know your emotions? How do you handle your emotions? Do you see yourself as others see you? The next is self-management. How do you manage your emotions? How do you handle yourself in a stressful situation? How you take care of yourself physically. The other is social awareness. That's how you understand other people in a social environment, how you interact in public, how you feel when you're in a social situation. And the fourth is relationship management. So how do you manage your relationships with others? So in order to get a little bit of insight into emotional intelligence is to understand how our brains are designed. So our brains were very good at letting us live throughout a lot of turmoil for the millions of years, finding food, shelter, reproducing, just staying alive. So the most primitive part of our brain is responsible for keeping us alive, and this is called the amygdala in the limbic system. So these things keep us out of harm's way, but in a modern world, they don't serve us as well. And so the most rational part of our brain, which makes us humans, is called the prefrontal cortex. So this is the part of the brain that acts rationally. And you hear the term that teenagers are crazy. And actually, technically they are, because the prefrontal cortex isn't fully formed until you're around 25. And so teenagers often get stuck in the primitive part of your brain, as do we as humans in our normal day in life. And with what's going on right now with this virus, a lot of us are retreating to our primitive brains. So studies on emotional intelligence show that 90% of top performers in a business have higher emotional intelligence skills. And I'm here to tell you, as a seasoned professional, I've seen people all over the map with emotional intelligence skills, but those people that I witnessed that were successful were compassionate, empathetic people that were self-aware and knew how to handle themselves and built strong relationships. EQ, according to this study from Bradbury, who wrote the Emotional Intelligence 2.0 book, says 58% your job performance is responsible for EQ. I would even put it higher, but 58 is a good number. And then monetarily, $29,000 more a year. So it's a great concept and it's pretty easy to understand. So the hardest part is really practicing it. And there are some certifications out there on the market. One that I use with my client is in the Emotional Intelligence 2.0 book. There's an assessment in the back, and it gives you a baseline of the 4 areas I discussed earlier. There are also some other tools out there on the market, the EQI. I've taken this as well, and I've used it in some of my teaching at the University of Maryland, Baltimore. So there's some great books out there, and it really comes down to practicing the skills. So understanding emotional intelligence is pretty straightforward, but really putting them into practice is the most difficult part. And as we know, as humans, forming new habits and forming things that require discipline are hard for us. So an example of that is the gym. Everyone joins the gym in January and they're very excited and they drop down and do the push-ups and they feel good. But then a couple weeks later, they're back sitting on the couch. Some people, not everybody. But my analogy there is it requires discipline to form these emotional intelligence habits and to practice them. So I highly recommend finding an emotional intelligence accountability partner. So when I started my coaching career, a colleague of mine and I bought the book and we went through it and took the assessment. And then every week we spent a half an hour kind of working on areas of self-improvement. So personally, my biggest challenge is self-management. So some of the things I've learned to help me with self-management is a daily meditation. And there's that expression, count to 10 and take a deep breath. So there's something to be said about that. And also I spend time reflecting every day, just kind of checking in with myself and doing the work. And then a big part of this is wellness. So if you're not getting a proper amount of sleep, you're not practicing a good diet, you're not exercising, and you're stressed out all the time, it's going to be really hard to build your emotional intelligence skills. So really taking care of yourself is so fundamentally important in growing as a person and as a professional. So again, a good diet, sleep, exercise, taking breaks frequently, avoiding multitasking, and just really honoring yourself and your body are very important in emotional intelligence practices. So I'll stop there, Sarah. Do you have any questions for me? And I'm going to provide my email address for anyone else who wants to learn more. My email address is joe@northrockleadership.com. And I have some articles published there that provide some helpful tips on some of the things I discussed today, but in particular time management, for which we all tend to struggle with on a daily basis. So thank you for your time. And Sarah, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. I do have a couple of questions for you. What area of your life have you noticed that developing emotional intelligence has made the most, like the most changes or the most progress in?
I would say too, it was once I became a leader, it really became apparent to me that I really needed to look out for other people and be aware of other people's emotions and feelings. I was kind of self-centered when I first started my leadership role in my early 30s, so I was really more thinking about myself than others. And then the second would be being a parent. It's the hardest job in the world, and kids are great at exercising your ability to stay calm and be rational. So those are the two things that I would say are the most important for me.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, your boys are home right now, aren't they?
They are, yes.
Gotcha.
And
College
I'm,
is canceled
uh,
and back to a full house,
yep,
huh?
yep. And I'm trying not to yell at them about leaving the lights on and doing things, but parenting is a great, and just being in stressful situations. And another thing I like to use is the acronym HALT, HALT. If you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, it's not a good time to make decisions, have critical conversations, and do things, because in that state of tension, you're not going to be making the best decisions.
That is interesting. I love that. Hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, and then moving forward, as we sort of see emotional intelligence become a household thing and more of a
Mm-hmm.
common thing in the personal development world, and what do you see changing in terms of our media, our family relationships, things like that? I don't want to get too political here, but it's interesting how things have developed with President Trump, like with this coronavirus specifically. I'm hearing this talk and
Mm-hmm.
it's just really interesting. So what do you think as a society, emotional intelligence will change?
Yeah, I think it's being recognized. When I first started talking about this emotional intelligence, I actually would buy it for people who I thought needed it, and it would just sit on their shelves. But now, as you said, Sarah, it is a household word. And I will tell you, I have a lot of clients across many, many industries, and organizations now are a lot more compassionate and empathetic, practicing mindfulness. And I think this virus as a whole is going to make us wake up a little bit in terms of being more compassionate and open, obviously spending time with our families. But I think as a whole, through the lens that I see the world, which is my corporate clients, organizations are a lot more open to these concepts, whereas 30 years ago, they would have said it's hippie nonsense, get to work or
Yeah.
you're fired. So, many organizations have emotional intelligence curriculums and practice it. So people are a lot more open to these concepts than they were, say, 5, 10 years ago.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, and then last question here. I'm going to order the book and I'll start working through that. But what are some practical tips that people can do to get started developing their EQ today?
I would say buy the book, Emotional Intelligence 2.0. It's a great book. I don't get compensated on it, but it's a great book. I use it kind of as a Bible. I just, every once in a while, I'll pick some things, especially this week. My motto is watch myself like a hawk, and really observe myself, especially in times of tension, and just really observing and reflecting and being honest with yourself is an important step, and putting the time into it. So just making it, 10 minutes a day just to think about it and talk about it. And then again, finding an accountability partner. That could be your spouse, could be going back. And actually, I take this assessment every 2 years. And one thing about the assessment is when you take it, we're in this culture where we want to all get A's. You can't get an A on your emotional intelligence. It's a lifelong journey. I'm about a B- now, so maybe maybe as I work through this, I'll be a B. But again, it's always a work in progress.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much, Joe. I appreciate it. Do you have anything else you want to add?
I don't. I invite you to discover emotional intelligence. It's a game changer in so many ways.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much. I appreciate it, Joe. You have a great day.
All right. Thanks, Sarah.
Bye.